how international relations scholars explain world politics. We've got a lot to cover today, so let's jump in with a little bit of context. International relations scholars examine states and their sort of modern understanding of the word. And that all happens after the 30 and the 80s year war in Europe, in which, all the different kings were going to war and killing each other and each other's populations. And they ended it with the Treaty of Westphalia. And in that treaty, they decided that they were going to stop interfering in each other's internal affairs. And that is where the concept of state sovereignty was established as a guiding concept of international relations. That's the whole notion that states have a right to decide what goes on in their borders. And so after that, industrialization began in England. It spread throughout Europe during the 1800s and was sort of the only game in town. So states had to industrialize to compete with each other. That entered us into an era of globalization, whereby economies and people and states from around the world become in increasing contact with each other. In 1814, after Napoleon invaded all throughout Europe, states came together in the Congress of Vienna to decide that they weren't going to allow this to happen again, and that they were going to work in what they called the Concert of Europe, sort of like a collective security treaty, to maintain a balance of power in which no state could become too powerful. Of course, that didn't work. We had states try to consolidate their power over Europe and over each other in World War I. After that, the League of Nations was established as a sort of forum for states to discuss and come to peaceful solutions. Obviously, that didn't work. The United States and other major world powers really weren't on board with it. So the world sort of exploded with World War II, and afterwards, a focus on communication and collaboration was once again established with the United Nations. That entered us into World War II, at least, entered us into a bipolar world, which means we had two superpowers, the US and the USSR, until 1991, when the USSR fell. Scholars at the time called this the end of history, which was sort of the notion that liberal democracy had prevailed forever. That's increasingly under question today. And so looking at all the things that go on in the world, war, cooperation, trade, all that sort of stuff, there are three types of theories that sort of deal with world politics: explanatory, constitutive, and normative. Explanatory theories focus on X as a causal factor and then Y as an outcome. Constitutive theories examine how theory and reality sort of build off of one another and contribute to each other. And then normative theories are ethics-based responses to phenomena. They sort of may look at world hunger and say, states have the power to solve this, so they should, because it's a bad thing for people to go hungry. So starting off with the explanatory theories, at least that's what we're going to be covering today. The one that I chose to start off with is realism. It's generally regarded as one of the oldest in international relations, and realists see states as the primary focus of their analysis. They're not worried about international organizations or institutions or even individual like presidents or something like that. And they see states as unitary actors, sort of acting like a black box almost. They do not say that, if so and so were president, this would have been different. They see states as responding in the same way to consistent phenomena. And then they look at the international system, which international relations scholars call anarchic. Now, when I say that it's anarchic, that it's a state of anarchy, what I don't mean is that, everyone is always at war with each other. What I mean is that there is no world police force to give order to the world. There's no unitary actor that can provide order for states to work along in. It's something that states come together and have to deal with, as there's no Supreme Court that they can appeal to or anything like that. And realists say that order under anarchy comes from states working to maintain the balance of power. Sort of going back to the whole concert of Europe thing that I talked about earlier. States seek to keep other states from becoming too powerful, from gaining too much. And realists focus their analysis on hard power, mostly the money and the military. That's what they see as most important for states. And of course, states are accumulating their hard power. They're competing with each other in their national interest, and that is survival and security. And if you want to sum up realism in the most cohesive way, a good place to turn is to the annals of history with Thucydides after the Peloponnesian War, where he said that the strong do as they please and the weak suffer as they must. That's a very realist outlook on international politics. And to sort of counter realists, we have liberals and liberalism. They believe that even though the international system is anarchic, states can come together and that they can work together to come up with outcomes in their mutual best interest. They see states, international governmental organizations, and non governmental organizations. So for IGOs, that would be something like the United Nations, NGOs, maybe the Carter Center. They see all of those as locuses of interest in international relations. And they don't see states as necessarily a black box like realists do. They see them as made up of bureaucracies, of political parties, of individuals, all with their own interests, and that it's not such a unitary actor as realists want you to believe. They believe that states can have national interests that go beyond just survival and security, that states can want to foster human rights for the sake of doing so, or the same with economic development in developing countries. Liberals also focus on soft power as a means of state power or as a form of state power, and that just means like ideas and influence as it relates to diplomacy. They believe that international institutions are good and that they can foster communication to help us, jump over the hurdle of anarchy. And they believe that economic interdependence is another good thing, a good part of globalization. That trading with one another is a hurdle to war. It's something that will prevent such competition. They also believe in democratic peace theory, that liberal democracies are less likely to go to war with each other because people are less likely to vote themselves into a war. And then finally, there's constructivism. And constructivism is a little bit different from the first two that are like purely explanatory. This one is a little bit constitutive too. Constructivists see all aspects of international politics as something that we construct for ourselves, meaning that, well, rather, one rather prominent constructivist, Alexander Wendt, says that anarchy is what states make of it. And what constructivists do is they focus on identities, norms, rules, and shared histories, and they look at how they impact state behavior. So this might be states refusing to put tariffs on each other just because it's not something that they've done historically, or that states who have traded with each other for a long time have built trust and they're willing to enter into military analysis, or that states might go to war to defend one democracy because they want to be seen or they identify as a defender of democracy. And one major difference, I think, from realism and even constructivism is how focused they are on individuals and human agency in shaping state behavior. So a constructivist might look at, the United States pulling out of the Paris Climate Accords and say, that's strictly because Donald Trump is such a wild card president. That's not something that realists or liberals would necessarily do. And so, now that you have some of the beginning tools to examining, to analyzing, and to discussing international politics, I have some discussion questions if you just want to process the information a little differently. So take a minute, think to yourself, do you agree with realists that states are the primary actors in international relations? Is the anarchic nature of the international system a barrier to cooperation? And, some argue that state identities shape foreign policy decisions.